I thought I knew everything about my husband. After 15 years of marriage, I believed I could read every expression on his face, understand every silence, predict every habit. Thaddeus Meriwether had been my rock, my constant, the man who held my hand through my mother's passing and celebrated every small victory in my career as a speech therapist. We had built what I considered an unshakable life together in our modest but warm home in Portland, Oregon, where the rain tapped against our windows like a familiar friend and the smell of fresh coffee always greeted us in the morning. But on that gray Thursday in late October, when the autumn leaves were surrendering to the wind and scattering across our driveway like abandoned hopes, everything I thought I knew shattered into a million irreparable pieces. It started innocently enough, the way most catastrophic discoveries do. Thaddeus had kissed me goodbye that morning, his lips brushing my forehead with the same gentle pressure they always did, his cologne lingering in the air long after he closed the door. He mentioned something about a business trip to Seattle, a meeting with potential investors for the marketing firm where he worked as a senior consultant. Nothing unusual. He traveled for work every few months, sometimes staying away for 3 or 4 days at a time. I had grown accustomed to the empty side of the bed, to eating dinner alone with only the television for company, to the way the house seemed to hold its breath in his absence. But this time felt different somehow, though I could not quite articulate why. There was a tension in his shoulders when he hugged me, a fleeting shadow that passed across his eyes when I asked what time his flight departed. I dismissed it as work stress, as I had dismissed so many other small inconsistencies over the past 2 years. The day unfolded in its ordinary rhythm. I saw 4 clients at the clinic, working with children who struggled to form words that came so easily to others, celebrating small breakthroughs that their parents would treasure forever. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home, wandering the familiar aisles and selecting ingredients for meals I would eat alone. The normalcy of it all felt suffocating somehow, as though the universe was playing a cruel joke, allowing me to perform the motions of my regular life while something fundamental had already shifted beneath my feet. When I arrived home, I unpacked the groceries with methodical precision, putting everything in its designated place, maintaining the order that had always given me comfort. It was only when I went to charge my phone that I realized I had accidentally grabbed Thaddeus's charging cable that morning in my rush to leave for work. His cable, his phone, they were identical to mine except for the small blue case he used instead of my red one. I would not have thought twice about it, would not have invaded his privacy, if his phone had not buzzed insistently on the kitchen counter as I prepared a salad for dinner. 3 messages in quick succession, the screen lighting up with notifications. I glanced over, not intending to read anything, but the preview text was right there, impossible to ignore. The message was from a contact saved simply as home, and it read, "Daddy, when are you coming back? Lily misses you so much. We made your favorite cookies today." My hands stopped moving. The cucumber I had been slicing forgotten on the cutting board. I read the message again, certain I had misunderstood, that there was some rational explanation that would make sense of those words. Daddy, wee Lily. None of these words belonged in a message to my husband. We had no children. I had spent years coming to terms with my infertility, had weathered the storm of disappointment and grief that came with each failed treatment, each negative test, each passing month that reminded me of what my body could not do. My heart began to hammer against my ribs as I picked up his phone, my fingers trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. I knew his passcode. We had never hidden anything from each other, or so I believed. The phone unlocked on the first try, and I navigated to his messages with a growing sense of dread that made my stomach churn. The conversation thread with home stretched back months, hundreds of messages filled with domestic details that belonged to a life I knew nothing about. There were photos of a little girl with dark curls and gap-toothed smiles, a child who could not have been more than 6 or 7 years old. She was holding up drawings, posing with a golden retriever, sitting at a dinner table with spaghetti sauce smeared across her cheeks. In several photos, a woman appeared beside her, a woman with kind eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. The woman was beautiful in an understated way, with laugh lines around her eyes and the comfortable confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. I scrolled through message after message, each one driving a knife deeper into my chest. Discussions about parent-teacher conferences and doctor's appointments. Reminders to pick up milk and bread on the way home. Sweet messages about how much they missed him, how they were counting the days until he returned. The messages from Thaddeus were warm and affectionate, calling the woman sweetheart and my love, promising the little girl that he would be home soon, that he would take her to the park just like he promised. This was not an affair. This was not some temporary mistake or moment of weakness. This was an entire life, a complete family, a parallel existence that he had been living while I waited for him at home, trusting every word he said. The room began to spin, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. Questions flooded my mind faster than I could process them. How long had this been going on? Who was this woman? Was this child his daughter? How had he managed to maintain two separate lives without me suspecting anything? The logistical impossibility of it seemed overwhelming, and yet here was the evidence, undeniable and devastating, glowing on the screen in my shaking hands. I thought about all the business trips, all the late nights at the office, all the weekend conferences that had taken him away. Had any of them been real? Or had every single one been a lie, an excuse to go to his other family, his real family? While I played the role of the oblivious wife, who asked no questions and suspected no betrayal, I opened the GPS history on his phone, my fingers moving with a clarity of purpose that surprised me given the chaos in my mind. If he had lied about Seattle, I needed to know where he really was. The location history loaded slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. When it finally appeared, my worst fears were confirmed. He was not in Seattle. He was not at any hotel or conference center. The little blue dot that represented my husband was stationary at an address in Gresham, a suburb just 20 minutes east of Portland. I stared at that dot, at that address, and something inside me crystallized into a cold, hard determination. I needed to see this for myself. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I needed to look this betrayal in the face and know its full dimensions. I grabbed my keys and my own phone, leaving his on the counter where it continued to buzz with messages from the life he had hidden from me. The drive to Gresham passed in a blur of anger and tears, my emotions swinging wildly between disbelief and rage, between heartbreak and a strange detached curiosity. The address led me to a quiet residential street, lined with modest single-family homes, each with carefully maintained lawns and the kind of cozy charm that spoke of stable, happy families. I pulled over across the street from the house. The GPS had indicated a pale yellow cottage with white trim and a swing set visible in the backyard. The mailbox read Merriweather, and seeing our last name on that mailbox felt like a physical blow. He had given them his name. He had given them everything that was supposed to be ours. I sat in my car for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, watching the house as the evening shadows lengthened and the streetlights began to flicker on. Through the large front window, I could see movement, glimpses of life unfolding in the warm glow of interior lights. Then he appeared, my husband, walking through what must have been the living room with the little girl from the photos riding on his shoulders. She was laughing, her small hands tangled in his hair, and he was smiling up at her, with an expression of pure joy that I recognized because he used to look at me that way in the early years of our marriage. The woman emerged from another room, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and Thaddeus set the girl down gently before crossing to kiss the woman on the lips with casual familiarity, the kind of kiss that spoke of routine and comfort and belonging. I could not breathe. I could not move. I sat frozen in my car, watching this tableau of domestic bliss, this family that my husband had created while pretending to be fully committed to our marriage. The little girl ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass, and for one heart-stopping moment I thought she had seen me, but she was just watching something outside, perhaps a neighbor's cat, or the wind rustling through the trees. She had his nose, I realized with a sharp pang. She had his dark hair and his lanky frame. There was no question that this was his biological child. The timeline clicked into place in my mind. 2 years ago, Thaddeus had gone through what he described as a midlife crisis. He had become distant and moody, taking longer trips for work and spending more time away from home. I had attributed it to stress, to the pressures of his job and his own disappointment about our inability to have children. I had given him space, had been patient and understanding, had believed him when he said he just needed time to work through his feelings. But he had not been working through anything. He had been building this other life. He had been falling in love with another woman, creating the family that he and I could never have together. The cruelty of it was staggering. While I had been grieving our childlessness, while I had been attending support groups and trying to make peace with a future without children, he had simply found another woman who could give him what I could not. He had not ended our marriage. He had not been honest about his feelings or his desires. He had simply added another life on top of the one we shared, dividing himself between two homes. Two women, two completely different versions of reality. The front door of the yellow house opened, and Thaddeus stepped onto the porch, pulling his phone from his pocket. He looked at the screen, his expression shifting from contentment to concern. He was checking his phone, the one I had left at home, probably seeing my messages, asking where he was and why he was not answering. He said something over his shoulder to the woman, who had joined him on the porch, and she placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Even from this distance, I could read the worry on his face. He knew something was wrong. He could sense that his carefully constructed double life was beginning to collapse. I should have driven away. I should have gone home to think, to plan, to decide what I wanted to do with this information. But instead, I opened my car door and stepped out into the cool evening air. My legs felt unsteady beneath me as I crossed the street, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Thaddeus looked up as I approached, and the color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. The woman followed his gaze, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she registered the look on his face, and then turned to see me climbing the steps to their porch. "Vivian," Thaddeus said, my name coming out as barely more than a whisper. He held up his hands as though to ward off a physical blow. "What are you doing here? What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "What are you doing here, Thaddeus? You are supposed to be in Seattle. On a business trip. Or was that just another lie in a long series of lies?" The woman stepped forward, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Who is this?" she asked Thaddeus, but her eyes were on me, studying my face with growing unease. "This is my wife," I said before Thaddeus could respond. "My name is Vivian Meriwether, and I have been married to this man for 15 years. And who might you be?" The woman's face went pale, and she took a step backward, nearly stumbling on the porch steps. "That is not possible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was already believing it, already seeing the truth in Thaddeus's stricken expression and guilty silence. "Mama," a small voice called from inside the house. "What is happening?" The little girl appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes wide with concern. She looked at me with innocent curiosity, tilting her head to one side. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am nobody," I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to remain composed. "I am just someone who made a terrible mistake." Thaddeus finally found his voice. "Vivian, please, let me explain. This is not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. "It looks like you have been living a double life. It looks like you have another wife and a child that I knew nothing about. Please, enlighten me. Tell me what I am missing." The woman, who I later learned was named Cassandra Linwood, wrapped her arms around herself as though trying to hold her body together. "Thaddeus told me he was divorced," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said his marriage had ended 3 years ago. He said he had moved on." 3 years ago, I repeated, doing the math in my head. 3 years ago we were celebrating our 12th wedding anniversary in Vancouver. 3 years ago we were talking about adopting a child since we could not have one of our own. 3 years ago I had no idea that my husband was a liar and a fraud. Thaddeus tried to move toward me, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Do not come near me," I said, my voice cold and flat. "Do not touch me. Do not say my name. You lost that right the moment you decided to build this life, while pretending to be committed to ours. Daddy." The little girl's voice was trembling now, picking up on the tension that crackled in the air like electricity before a storm. "Why is everyone upset?" Cassandra moved quickly, scooping the child into her arms and carrying her back inside. I could hear her soothing words, trying to shield her daughter from the ugliness unfolding on their front porch. Thaddeus and I stood in silence, staring at each other across a chasm that had opened so suddenly I was still reeling from its depth. This man who I had loved, who I had trusted with every part of myself, was a stranger. I realized I had never really known him at all. Or perhaps I had known him once, in those early years when our love was new and everything seemed possible. But he had transformed into someone unrecognizable, someone capable of sustaining a deception of such magnitude that it boggled the mind. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been with her?" "For years," he admitted, his shoulders sagging with the weight of his confession. "For years," I echoed, calculating backwards. "So, you were already with her when we went to that marriage counselor. When we were trying to work on our intimacy issues. When you held me while I cried about not being able to have a baby. You were with her through all of that." He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Is the child yours?" "Yes," he said simply. "Her name is Lily. She is 6 years old." 6 years old. He had been a father for 6 years and never told me. He had experienced the birth of his child, had been there for first steps and first words, had tucked her into bed at night and read her stories, all while maintaining the fiction that he and I were childless together. The betrayal was so complete, so total, that I could not even begin to process its full dimensions. I had spent 6 years mourning a loss that was not real, grieving for a family we would never have, while he had simply gone and created that family somewhere else. "Does she know?" I asked. "Does Cassandra know that we are still married? That you go home to me between visits here?" "She knows now," he said miserably. "But she did not know before. You told her you were divorced. You lied to both of us." I laughed again, that same bitter sound. I almost admire the audacity of it. The sheer logistical nightmare of maintaining 2 complete lives. "How did you do it? How did you keep track of all the lies?" "I never meant for this to happen," he said, and there was genuine anguish in his voice. "I love you, Vivian. I have always loved you. But when we could not have children, when the doctors told us it was unlikely to ever happen, something inside me broke. I could not accept it. I could not imagine a life without children. And then I met Cassandra at a conference, and she was kind and understanding, and one thing led to another." "One thing led to another," I repeated slowly. "You mean you had an affair? You mean you got another woman pregnant while you were married to me? You mean you decided to keep that child and that woman in your life without ever giving me the choice to know about it, or to leave you, or to do anything except continue living in ignorance?" "I did not want to hurt you," he said, and I saw tears beginning to form in his eyes. "You did not want to hurt me." My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "You did not want to hurt me, so you lied to me every single day for 4 years. You created a secret family and let me believe I was the only woman in your life. That is not protecting me from hurt, Thaddeus. That is the deepest betrayal I can imagine." The front door opened again, and Cassandra emerged, her face streaked with tears. She had composed herself somewhat, but her hands were still shaking. "I need to know," she said, addressing Thaddeus. "I need to know if anything you told me was true. Are you really a marketing consultant? Is your name even Thaddeus Meriwether?" "Everything else was true," he said quietly. "My job, my name, my feelings for you. The only lie was about my marriage." "The only lie," Cassandra repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The only lie was that you had an entire other life. Another woman who you were committed to. A whole existence that you hid from me while I built my life around you and introduced you to my daughter as her father. I looked at this woman, this Cassandra, and saw my own pain reflected in her face. We were both victims of Thaddeus's selfishness, both casualties of his inability to make a choice and commit to it. She had believed she was building a life with a divorced man, starting fresh with someone who was free to love her fully. Instead, she had been another piece in his elaborate deception, another person he was lying to daily. Her daughter called him daddy, trusted him, loved him, and now that relationship was built on a foundation of lies that was crumbling beneath their feet. We should talk, I said to Cassandra, surprising myself. Not now, but soon. We need to figure out what happens next. She nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. I have so many questions. So do I admitted. But right now I need to leave before I say something I will regret. Or do something I will regret. I turned to Thaddeus, looking at him fully for the first time since this confrontation began. I want you out of our house by the end of the week. Pack your things and go wherever you want, but you cannot stay with me. Our marriage is over. I will contact a lawyer on Monday. Vivian, please, he began, but I cut him off. There is nothing you can say that will change this. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. I hope it was worth it. I hope your secret family was worth destroying everything we built together. I walked away without looking back, my legs somehow carrying me down the porch steps, across the street, back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition, but I managed to start the engine and pull away from that yellow house, from that parallel life, from the man I had thought I knew. I drove without conscious thought, my body on autopilot as my mind tried to catch up with everything that had just happened. I ended up at a viewpoint overlooking the city. The lights of Portland spread out below me like fallen stars. I sat there in the darkness and let myself fall apart. I cried until there were no tears left, my body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. I cried for the 15 years I had given to a man who did not value them. I cried for the family I had wanted so desperately and had grieved losing. I cried for Cassandra and for little Lily, innocent victims of Thaddeus's choices. I cried for myself, for the version of me who had woken up that morning believing her life was stable and secure, who had kissed her husband goodbye without suspecting that her entire world was about to shatter. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow and exhausted, wrung out like a dish rag. But beneath the emptiness, there was something else beginning to stir. Anger, cold, clear anger that cut through the grief like a knife. Thaddeus had stolen for years from me. For years when I could have been moving on, building a new life, finding someone who would value me and be honest with me. For years when I had settled into a marriage that was already dead without even knowing it. He had robbed me of my agency, my ability to make informed choices about my own life. He had treated me like a placeholder, someone to come home to when his real life was not available. The next few days passed in a strange fog. I called in sick to work, unable to face the cheerful mundanity of helping children learn to speak when my own voice felt strangled in my throat. Thaddeus came to the house once to collect some of his belongings, and we moved around each other like ghosts, not speaking, barely acknowledging the other's presence. He tried several times to start a conversation, to explain, or apologize or justify, but I turned away each time. There was nothing he could say that would make any of this better. The damage was done, complete and irreversible. I spent hours on the phone with my sister Rosalind, who lived in California, and immediately offered to fly up to be with me. I told her not to come yet, that I needed time alone to process everything. She listened while I ranted and cried and tried to make sense of the senseless. She reminded me that none of this was my fault, that Thaddeus's choices reflected on him and not on me. Intellectually I knew she was right, but emotionally I could not help wondering what I had done wrong, what I had failed to see, how I had been so blind to what was happening right under my nose. On the third day after the discovery, Cassandra called me. I had left my number with her before driving away that night, scribbling it on a piece of paper that I had shoved into her hand without explanation. Now her name appeared on my phone screen, and I stared at it for several rings before answering. "Hello," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Vivian," she said, and her voice sounded as wrecked as mine felt. "I hope this is okay, that I am calling. I needed to talk to someone who understands what this feels like." "It is okay," I said, moving to the couch and curling into its corner. "I have been thinking about you too. About you and Lily." "She keeps asking where her daddy is," Cassandra said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "She does not understand why he is not coming home. How do I explain this to a 6-year-old? How do I tell her that her whole life has been based on a lie?" "I do not know," I admitted. "I am still trying to figure out how to explain it to myself." We talked for over an hour, comparing notes, filling in the gaps in each other's understanding. Cassandra told me about how they met at a marketing conference in Denver, how Thaddeus had seemed so kind and available, how he had told her his marriage had ended badly but that he was ready to move on. He had courted her carefully, visiting her in Gresham every few weeks, always with a good explanation for why they could not spend more time together. His job kept him busy. He traveled a lot for work. He had obligations that he needed to handle. She had believed it all because why would she not? He seemed genuinely committed to her and to Lily, whom he had embraced as his own, when he discovered Cassandra was pregnant. I told her about our marriage, about the years of trying to have a child, about the fertility treatments that failed one after another, about the grief that had consumed us both. I told her about the marriage counseling, about how I had thought we were working through our problems together, about how I had believed Thaddeus when he said he was committed to making our relationship work. I described the business trips, the late nights, all the little absences that I had rationalized away as the demands of his career. "He told me you could not have children," Cassandra said quietly. "He said it was one of the reasons your marriage fell apart, that you both wanted different things." "He was right about me not being able to have children," I said, the old familiar pain rising in my chest. "But we wanted the same thing. At least I thought we did." We talked about adoption. We talked about IVF with a donor. We talked about building a life that would be fulfilling even without biological children. I thought we were on the same page. I thought we were facing our disappointment together. Instead, he just went and got someone else pregnant. Cassandra said bluntly, "God, when I think about it now, when I remember telling him I was expecting and watching his face light up, I wonder how much of that joy was real, and how much was relief that he was finally going to have what he wanted, what you could not give him." Her words stung because they voiced a fear I had been trying not to acknowledge. Had Thaddeus stopped loving me when he realized I could not bear his children? Had all his reassurances been lies? Empty words meant to placate me while he searched for a replacement? The thought was almost unbearable, but I forced myself to sit with it, to examine it from all angles. Whatever Thaddeus's motivations had been, whatever twisted logic had allowed him to justify his actions, the result was the same. He had betrayed both of us, had built his happiness on a foundation of deceit that was now collapsing and taking all of us down with it. Over the following weeks, Cassandra and I developed an unlikely friendship born of shared trauma. We met for coffee several times, comparing our experiences, helping each other see the patterns in Thaddeus's behavior that we had both missed. She showed me photos of Lily, this beautiful little girl who was innocent in all of this, who loved her daddy with the uncomplicated devotion of childhood. I found myself looking at those photos with a complicated mixture of emotions. Part of me resented this child, this living proof that Thaddeus had been able to create the family he wanted with someone else. But a larger part of me felt only sadness for her, for the confusion and pain she must be experiencing as her world fell apart around her. The divorce proceedings began, and they were as ugly as I had feared. Thaddeus tried to negotiate, tried to explain his actions in ways that might preserve some shred of dignity or sympathy. His lawyer argued that he had been driven to infidelity by the strain of our infertility issues, that he had made mistakes but still cared deeply for me. My lawyer dismantled those arguments with ruthless efficiency, painting a picture of systematic deception and emotional cruelty that left no room for sympathy. The judge was not moved by Thaddeus's excuses, and the settlement heavily favored me. But no amount of money or assets could compensate for what had been taken from me. 15 years of my life, years when I could have been finding someone worthy of my trust and love, years when I could have been building a real partnership with someone honest. I was 42 years old, starting over from scratch, trying to rebuild an identity that had been so thoroughly entwined with Thaddeus that I barely knew who I was without him. I threw myself into therapy, determined to understand how I had missed the signs, how I could protect myself from this kind of betrayal in the future. My therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Gwendolyn Sharp, helped me see that there had been signs, small inconsistencies that I had overlooked or rationalized away. The way Thaddeus's work schedule became more irregular over the years. The increasing emotional distance despite his protests that nothing was wrong. The vague answers when I asked for specifics about his trips or meetings. I had noticed these things on some level, had felt the subtle wrongness of them, but I had trusted him enough to dismiss my own instincts. Dr. Sharp taught me that trust is earned, not given blindly, and that healthy relationships require transparency and honesty as their foundation. 6 months after the discovery, I ran into Cassandra at a grocery store. We had not spoken in several weeks, both of us needing space to process our separate paths forward. She looked thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and emotional exhaustion. But there was also a new strength in her bearing, a determination that had not been there before. "How are you doing?" I asked, and the question felt inadequate for everything we had been through. "Better," she said, and I could hear the truth in it. "It has been hard, especially with Lily. She misses Thaddeus, and she is angry with me for making him go away. But we are getting through it." We started counseling, which has helped her understand that none of this was her fault. "And you?" I asked. "How are you holding up?" "Some days are harder than others," she admitted. "I built my whole life around the idea that Thaddeus and I had a future together. Letting go of that vision has been painful. But I am starting to see it as a gift in a way. Better to know the truth now than to waste more years with someone who was never really mine." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I have been thinking the same thing. As much as this hurts, as angry as I am also grateful that I found out when I did. I could have gone on believing his lies for years longer. "Have you heard from him?" Cassandra asked, and there was curiosity in her voice but no longing. "He calls sometimes," I said, "leaves messages saying he wants to talk, that he made mistakes, but still cares about me. I have not responded. There is nothing left to say. He tried to come by the house a few times to see Lily," Cassandra told me. "I let him visit with her in supervised settings because regardless of what he did to us, he is still her father and she loves him. But as for us, for any kind of romantic relationship, that door is closed forever. I could never trust him again." "Neither could I agreed. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, two women bound together by the actions of the same man, both victims and survivors of his betrayal. "You know," Cassandra said slowly, "I used to think I needed him to be complete. That Lily needed a father in the house, that I needed a partner to help me navigate life. But the past few months have taught me that I am stronger than I knew. Lily and I are going to be fine. Better than fine. We are going to build a life that is honest and true, without lies or secrets. I am trying to learn the same lesson," I told her. "That I can be complete on my own, that my value is not determined by my relationship status or my ability to have children." It is a hard lesson, but an important one. We exchanged numbers again, promising to stay in touch, and then went our separate ways. As I drove home that day, I thought about how strange life could be, how the worst betrayals could sometimes lead to unexpected connections and growth. I would never be grateful for what Thaddeus did, would never forgive the years of lies and deception. But I could choose how I moved forward from this point. I could choose to let this experience destroy me, or I could choose to let it transform me into someone stronger and wiser. I chose transformation. I threw myself into my work with renewed passion, finding deep satisfaction in helping children overcome their obstacles. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage, building a social circle that was mine alone. I took up painting, discovering a talent I never knew I had, creating abstract works that expressed emotions I could not put into words. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see, no longer waiting for a partner to accompany me. I learned to eat dinner alone without feeling lonely, to sleep in an empty bed without feeling abandoned, to make decisions based solely on what I wanted without considering anyone else's needs or desires. A year after the discovery, I received an unexpected letter from Thaddeus. It was pages long, filled with explanations and apologies and justifications. He detailed his thought process during those years of deception, trying to help me understand what had driven him to make the choices he made. He talked about his fear of losing me, his desperation to have a child, his inability to choose between two lives that he valued equally. He claimed to have been trying to protect everyone, to avoid hurting anyone, not realizing that his lies were causing far more damage than the truth ever could have. He ended the letter by saying he still loved me, that he had never stopped loving me, and that he hoped someday I might be able to forgive him. I read the letter twice, feeling almost nothing. The man who wrote those words was a stranger to me now. Whatever love I had felt for Thaddeus Merriweather had died the night I stood on that porch and looked at his secret family. In its place was something harder and clearer: understanding without sympathy, closure without reconciliation. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with the other remnants of our marriage, the photos and cards and mementos of a life that no longer existed. Then I put the box in the attic, out of sight but preserved, a reminder of who I had been and how far I had come. 2 years after the discovery, I was ready to try again. Not another marriage, not another serious relationship, but at least the possibility of letting someone new into my life. My friends encouraged me to try online dating, and after much hesitation, I created a profile. I was honest about my past, about my divorce and my infertility, about the betrayal I had experienced and the walls I had built around my heart as protection. I expected this honesty to scare people away, but instead, it attracted men who appreciated my directness, who had their own scars and stories, who understood that everyone carries damage into new relationships. I went on several dates, some good and some terrible, learning to trust my instincts again, to recognize red flags that I had missed before. I met a man named Fletcher Beaumont, who was a wildlife photographer, recently widowed, with grown children who lived on the other side of the country. He was kind and patient, willing to move at my pace, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, building a friendship that slowly, tentatively, began to deepen into something more. He knew about Thaddeus, about the double life and the betrayal, and he never tried to minimize what I had been through or rush me past my lingering trust issues. "I am not him," Fletcher told me one evening, as we watched the sunset from his boat on the Willamette River. "I cannot promise I will never hurt you, because people hurt each other sometimes even when they do not mean to. But I can promise that I will always be honest with you, that I will never hide who I am or what I am doing. You will always know where you stand with me. That is all I can ask for," I said, and I meant it. I was learning that perfect certainty does not exist in relationships, that trust always involves some element of risk. But there was a difference between reasonable risk and blind faith. Fletcher was showing me through his actions that he was worth the risk, that his words matched his behavior, that he valued transparency as much as I did. 3 years after the discovery, Cassandra reached out to me with surprising news. She had met someone too, a teacher at Lily's school who had been patient and understanding about her complicated past. They were taking things slowly, building something real and honest. Lily was thriving, adjusting to her new reality with the resilience of childhood. She still saw Thaddeus occasionally, supervised visits where he tried to explain and apologize in ways that an 8-year-old could understand. But her world no longer revolved around him. She had learned that love could be conditional after all. That even parents could fail you, but that life could still be good and full of possibility. "I wanted to thank you," Cassandra said during one of our occasional phone calls, "for not hating me, for not blaming me for what happened. A lot of women would have seen me as the enemy. You were not the enemy," I told her. "You were another victim. Thaddeus is the one who made the choices that hurt us both. You thought he was available, that you were building something real. You did not know you were participating in his deception any more than I did." "Still," she said, "your kindness meant a lot to me during a really dark time. I do not think I could have gotten through it without knowing that you did not hold me responsible. We both survived something terrible," I said. "That creates a bond, whether we want it or not. I am glad you are doing better. You deserve happiness, and so does Lily. So do you," she said firmly. "I hope Fletcher knows how lucky he is." As we ended the call, I thought about how much had changed in 3 years. The raw pain had faded to a dull ache, present but manageable. I no longer woke up angry or spent hours reliving the betrayal. I had built a new life from the ashes of the old one, a life that was authentically mine, built on truth and self-awareness. I would never understand how Thaddeus had justified his actions, how he had looked me in the eye and lied so effortlessly for so long. But I no longer needed to understand. His choices reflected on him, not on me. His inability to be honest said nothing about my worth or my value. I learned that betrayal changes you in ways both terrible and transformative. It strips away illusions and forces you to see people as they really are rather than as you wish them to be. It teaches you that trust is precious and should be given carefully, protected fiercely. It shows you depths of strength you never knew you possessed, reserves of resilience that only emerge when you have no other choice but to survive. I would not wish this experience on anyone, but I also cannot deny that it made me who I am now, someone stronger, wiser, more cautious but also more authentic. If you are listening to this story from wherever you are in the world, if you have experienced betrayal or deception, or the sudden destruction of everything you thought was real, I want you to know that you can survive it. The pain will feel unbearable at first, as though you might actually die from the weight of it. But you won't. You will wake up the next day, and the day after that, and slowly, imperceptibly, the weight will begin to lighten. You will discover that you are capable of more than you ever imagined, that you can rebuild from nothing, that you can learn to trust again even after trust has been shattered so completely. The GPS that led me to Thaddeus's other family that October evening gave me a gift, disguised as devastation. It gave me the truth, painful as it was. It gave me the opportunity to stop wasting my time with someone who did not value me. It gave me my life back, allowing me to redirect my energy toward people and experiences that were real and meaningful. 3 years later, I can honestly say that while I would not choose to go through it again, I am grateful for where it has led me. I am grateful for the woman I have become, for the authentic life I have built, for the real love I am learning to accept from Fletcher, for the friendship I found with Cassandra in the aftermath of shared trauma. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, wherever you are in the world right now. If my experience resonates with you, if it helps you feel less alone in your own struggles, then sharing it has been worthwhile. Please leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Let me know if this story touched you, or taught you something, or simply made you feel understood. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about survival and transformation, and the complicated, messy beauty of human experience, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I will be back with more stories soon, more truth about the ways we hurt each other and heal ourselves and find our way back to hope, even when it seems impossible. Until then, take care of yourselves, be gentle with your hearts, and remember that you are stronger than you know.